Picture this. You walk into your office on what you think is just another regular Tuesday morning, coffee in hand, ready to tackle your to-do list, when your psychotic manager calls you into the conference room with that sadistic smirk that immediately tells you this isn't going to be a pleasant conversation. But before I tell you about the most shocking workplace betrayal you've ever heard, where my toxic colleagues literally ate cake to celebrate my firing while my boss laughed like a maniac, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because, trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this entire wild ride that goes from corporate humiliation to ultimate revenge success story that will make your blood boil and your jaw drop. The fluorescent lights seem to flicker ominously as you sit down across from the most vindictive HR representative you've ever encountered and your backstabbing boss who's practically salivating at the opportunity to destroy your life. And you already know what's coming before they even open their venomous mouths, because the sadistic gleam in their eyes gives it all away. They deliver the news with corporate cruelty, using phrases like performance issues, attitude problems, and toxic behavior, when what they're really doing is projecting their own horrific management failures onto you while systematically destroying your reputation and your livelihood because they're threatened by anyone with actual competence and integrity. Your mind races through 1,000 thoughts at once as they smugly watch you process the devastation, clearly enjoying every second of your shock and confusion. Because these aren't just bad managers, they're workplace sociopaths who get off on wielding power over people's lives and careers like some twisted corporate game where human suffering is the entertainment. They hand you a pathetic cardboard box for your personal belongings while making snide comments about how you should have seen this coming, escort you to your desk like you're some kind of criminal, while your backstabbing colleagues suddenly find their computer screens incredibly interesting, and within 30 minutes you're being marched out the door with your career in ruins while they're already planning their celebration party. But here's where this story takes a turn so toxic and disgusting that it would make even the most hardened workplace survivor want to burn the entire corporate system to the ground. As you're frantically shoving your personal items into that humiliating cardboard box, trying to maintain some shred of dignity while processing the emotional devastation of sudden unemployment, you hear something coming from the break room that makes your blood turn to ice and your faith in humanity completely evaporate. There, not even 30 minutes after delivering the news that would financially devastate you and emotionally traumatize you for months, your former colleagues are gathered around a massive sheet cake with "finally" written in bright red frosting, plastic forks in hand, laughing like hyenas and toasting with coffee cups as if they're celebrating the company Christmas party rather than the professional execution of someone who had worked overtime countless nights to make them all look good. The sheer malicious cruelty hits you like a freight train loaded with betrayal and corporate psychopathy. Because while you're wondering how you'll explain this humiliation to your family and how you'll pay next month's rent, these workplace vultures are literally gorging themselves on celebration cake while making jokes about how they can finally get rid of all your stupid ideas and annoying work ethic. At first, your brain refuses to process what you're seeing and hearing because surely human beings can't be this callously evil. But as you stand there in shock, listening to the conversations drifting from the break room, the horrifying truth becomes crystal clear, like a nightmare you can't wake up from. They didn't just fire you. They orchestrated this entire sadistic performance specifically to maximize your humiliation and their twisted entertainment. You hear snippets of conversation that would make Satan himself cringe with disgust. Comments about how they've been planning this day for months, jokes about the look on your face when you got the news, bets about how long it would take you to cry, and detailed discussions about how they're going to split up your salary among themselves like vultures dividing carrion. The cake, as it turns out, was ordered 3 days in advance with specific instructions for the "finally" message, and they even took photos of themselves cutting it to post on their private group chat where they'd been plotting your downfall for weeks, turning your professional destruction into their personal social media content. Standing there with your pathetic box of belongings, watching these corporate monsters feast on your misery like it's their favorite dessert, you realize that what you thought was a workplace was actually a den of sociopaths who saw destroying your career as a team-building exercise, and your suffering wasn't just collateral damage in a business decision, it was the entire point of their sick entertainment. The betrayal cuts so deep, it feels like psychological torture, because you remember all the times you covered their mistakes, worked through weekends to meet their impossible deadlines, brought them coffee when they were stressed, listened to their personal problems, and even defended them to upper management when they screwed up. Never imagining that they were documenting every kindness as weakness and every good deed as ammunition for their eventual character assassination. You think back to all the fake smiles, the false encouragement, the manipulative team meetings where they pretended to value your input while secretly recording everything you said to use against you later. And you realize you've been working in a psychological torture chamber disguised as an office, where your colleagues were actually undercover sociopaths conducting a long-term experiment in human cruelty. As you walk past the break room one final time, someone actually has the demonic audacity to offer you a piece of the celebration cake while others pull out their phones to film your reaction, as if your final humiliation is the cherry on top of their sadistic sundae. And you can hear them barely containing their laughter as they watch you struggle to maintain your composure while your entire world crumbles around you. The whole situation feels like you've been transported into some nightmarish corporate horror movie, where you're the victim in a workplace slasher film, except instead of knives and blood, these monsters use HR policies and celebration cakes to systematically destroy their targets while filming the whole thing for their own sick amusement. But here's what these workplace psychopaths didn't expect, and here's where this story transforms from a tale of corporate abuse into the most satisfying revenge story you've ever heard. Instead of letting their sadistic celebration break your spirit permanently, you decide to channel every ounce of rage, humiliation, and betrayal into building something so spectacularly successful that their pathetic little cake party will haunt them for the rest of their miserable careers. Walking out of that corporate torture chamber, box in hand, and dignity somehow still intact despite their best efforts to destroy it, you make a blood oath to yourself that their cake-filled celebration will be the last time anyone gets to feast on your failures, because from this moment forward, you're going to build an empire so successful that they'll spend sleepless nights regretting the day they thought your destruction was worth celebrating with dessert. The drive home is a hurricane of emotions, rage at their inhuman cruelty, devastation from the calculated betrayal, but also a strange sense of liberation, because now you know exactly what kind of monsters these people are, and you're finally free from having to pretend they deserve your loyalty, your overtime, or even your basic human respect. You spend the first week in a fog of trauma, allowing yourself to feel the full impact of their psychological warfare, because pretending their abuse doesn't hurt would be dishonest and ultimately prevent you from using that pain as rocket fuel for your comeback story. But after the initial shock wears off, something incredible happens. You start to see their toxic behavior as the greatest gift they could have given you. Because now you're free to build something amazing without having to waste another second of your life enabling their dysfunction or pretending their mediocrity deserves your excellence. You dust off business ideas that you'd abandoned because you were too busy covering for their incompetence, reach out to former colleagues who actually have souls and professional ethics, and begin networking with people who understand that success doesn't require stepping on others or celebrating their suffering like some corporate death cult. The irony becomes absolutely delicious when you realize that their sadistic firing was actually the intervention you needed to stop wasting your talents on people who saw your dedication as a threat and your integrity as a weakness, finally pushing you to build something that truly reflects your capabilities without having to constantly navigate around workplace sociopaths. 6 months later, when your former company is drowning in the chaos that inevitably follows when you remove the one person who was actually holding everything together, and they're desperately posting job listings, trying to find someone with even half your skills and work ethic, you're launching your own company with major clients who specifically sought you out because word travels fast about people who deliver results without requiring a toxic work environment. A year after the cake incident, when they're dealing with massive client losses because it turns out that celebrating employee departures creates exactly the kind of toxic reputation that drives business away, You're being featured in industry publications as an entrepreneur who built a thriving culture company based on mutual respect rather than psychological warfare and celebration cakes. 2 years later, when several of your former colleagues are themselves getting fired because their toxic behavior finally caught up with them, and upper management realize that people who celebrate others' suffering probably aren't the team players they pretend to be, you're in a position to offer jobs to the few decent people who were trapped in that hellscape, while publicly declining to work with any company that employs the cake-eating sociopaths who thought your professional assassination was party-worthy. The beautiful irony of the whole nightmare is that their sadistic celebration cake became the catalyst for your greatest professional triumph, turning what they intended as your ultimate humiliation into the foundation of a success story so spectacular that their pathetic little cake party will haunt them for the rest of their miserable careers. Looking back now, you can honestly say that getting fired by those corporate monsters was the best thing that ever happened to your career. Not because workplace abuse is ever acceptable, but because it finally showed you exactly how toxic that environment was and gave you the motivation to build something infinitely better where success doesn't require destroying others and celebration cakes are reserved for
actual achievements rather than psychological torture. The cake they ate to commemorate your suffering became a symbol of everything wrong with toxic workplace culture and everything right about your decision to build a company where human decency isn't just tolerated, but required, proving that sometimes the people who celebrate your darkest moments are actually doing you the biggest favor by showing you exactly why you needed to escape their toxic influence and build something worthy of your talents. Today, when you share this story with other entrepreneurs and business leaders, it serves as a masterclass in recognizing workplace toxicity and turning traumatic experiences into transformative success, while also serving as a warning about the kind of corporate psychopaths who use celebration cakes as weapons of psychological warfare. The colleagues who thought your firing deserved a party taught you invaluable lessons about human nature, toxic leadership, and the importance of building a business culture where success is measured not just in profits, but in treating people with basic human dignity, rather than celebrating their professional destruction like some twisted corporate blood sport. Their cake celebration became your wake-up call. Their momentary sadistic joy became your permanent motivation for building something better. And their failure to recognize your worth became your opportunity to create a company where worth is recognized, respected, and rewarded. Building a legacy that proves the best revenge against workplace toxicity isn't just success, but creating an environment so healthy and productive that it makes their celebration cake look like exactly what it was: the desperate act of small-minded people who confused cruelty with power and mistook your departure for their victory.